Welcome to a live episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor. It is the podcast that brings you the very best guests in all of true crime. It is not a tagline. It is our reality. We have been crazy busy this week, so it's Thursday evening, and I'm a bit loopy, and we've had some heavy conversations over the last couple of days. Of course, Susan Smith had her parole hearing. She was denied parole 30 years after drowning her two young children, but after listening to some of that witness testimony during the parole hearing, I think everyone needed to decompress a little bit. You'll be happy to know my Fisher-Price equipment is acting up again, so I'm using my phone for my notes. So if I'm looking down, that's why. Hopefully at some point, I don't know how Wi-Fi works, it will connect and everything in the world will be okay. Today, we are back on Sean Diddy Combs, and you guys are in for a treat because we've got an amazing best guest panel for you, starting off with the type of guy that I love, retired NYPD from my neck of the woods. I grew up in Jersey. Tom is from the upper part of Manhattan, where I once taught little kids. After the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001, Tom Smith was asked to join the elite FBI NYPD Joint Terrorism Task Force. For the last 17 years of his 30-year career in the NYPD, Tom investigated terrorism cases, both domestically and internationally. He's now the COO of Impact Solutions. It's an alternate solution to pepper spray. Hey, Tom, we're going to have to talk. Maybe you can sponsor my show. We've got a lot of women here. It's like 83 or 84% female who could use that in case anything happens. And, of course, guys can use that as well. Tom also co-hosts his own podcast called Gold Shields, which I'm going to check out. Is that on YouTube, Tom, or is it just an audio podcast?
No, it's on YouTube as well.
Awesome. I'm going to check that out. I love hearing cop stories and advice from police. Next up, he's been here before. Very, very, very bright legal mind, Ryan Vescio. He's a former Orange County homicide prosecutor. We got to know Ryan during the Sarah Boone trial, the woman who's convicted of zippering her boyfriend into a suitcase and letting him suffocate. The craziness is seemingly endless. Last but not least, Dwayne Cates, D-W-A-N-E, no Y in there. Born and raised in Wyoming, Arizona. I met my wife in Tucson. I never heard of Wyoming, Arizona. Where is Wyoming?
I was born and raised in Wyoming, actually. I live in Arizona now.
Oh, okay. It says here, oh, you got to fix your bio then, because it says Wyoming, comma, Arizona. So what do I know? I'm just a dumb host. And I
didn't
just
write the bio. Someone must be my publicist.
Yeah, we're going to have to get them, taken care of here. But it says you have the heart and soul of a cowboy. What is the crux of your practice in the Phoenix area?
I do about 98% criminal defense. I do big, high-profile homicide cases. I've done cases on Dateline NBC. I've done, 30-year-old cold case murders. I do a lot of. I'm a commentator for the news channels. In fact, I've got a suit on because just before this started, I was on the local news channel commenting on a case. So my YouTube channel, I probably have 200 or 300 clips of me on various news channels. And they have me on because I can look like I know what I'm talking about, even if I have no clue.
What is the YouTube channel?
It's Dwayne Cates, all one word.
There you go, D-W-A-N-E. And again, Tom's podcast, Gold Shields, which I'm excited to check out. I figure if I turn on my iPad on and off enough times, maybe my notes will load up. But Ryan Vescio, I texted you, or Steve did earlier in the day, kindly asking you to come on, and you were kind enough to oblige. But then went on to say that you yourself had a quasi-similar case with a rapper living a somewhat comparable life. Tell us about this, and it's got to inform your opinion on Diddy a little bit, I think.
It does. You know, what we see so much, and what we saw with that case here in Orlando, was an individual who came for nowhere, wanted to be bigger than who he really was, and exhibit this playboy persona to where they could call the shots, and no matter what they say goes, and people do things that they normally wouldn't do just because of who that person is. So the case we worked here in Orlando was over 3 or 4 years, where this rapper was finding young girls, 14 to 20, on the streets and bringing them into his empire, and using drugs and sex and violence to get them to go out and prostitute and make money and be in his videos. Nothing to the scale that we see with Diddy, but I don't know if we've ever seen anything quite to this scale. And the thing about it is the more and more that we peel back the onion, more and more layers continue to come out on this one, Joel.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. So Tom, to you, you're obviously the law enforcement officer out of the bunch. No better, there is no better law enforcement agency, in my opinion, in the world than NYPD. And thank you for your service after 9/11. By the way, do you know Bobby Chacon?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, he's retired NYPD, retired FBI, and retired attorney. Very smart guy, good guy. So, I mean, what do you think took so long? Like, why wasn't law enforcement, you know, in on this, or have a at least an idea of what was going on? I mean, some of these accusations date all the way back to 1991. Diddy is obviously a New Yorker at heart. He later moved to LA, but did the NYPD drop the ball at all by not picking up on this earlier?
No, I don't think so, because, you know, and I'm not even saying that they didn't. You know, it takes this complex of a case over multiple states and multiple cities, involving so much, takes a long time. It takes a lot of time. And to bring it and present it to the U.S. Attorney's Office, you need to have everything in a nice, solid package before you do that, because they're not going to go after or start the prosecution process unless they have a bow tie on it. And that's just how the Southern District especially works. So it may have taken a lot of time. And that is because you have witnesses, you have maybe sources, you maybe have undercovers or sources in these organizations that are reporting back, and you know, you're gathering all this information to get it to a certain level to then start presenting it. So this complexity of a case takes a long time. So when it actually started and where they went with it, that's going to be hard to pin down. But I think, you know, inevitably in the end, they got to where they wanted to be.
Yeah. And by the way, Tom, before I forget, and I will, the early days of this, people were claiming that Diddy himself was acting as an FBI informant. That was kind of shot down, but I mean, there's obviously no truth to that, I take it.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't, you know, that was always a rumor, but there's rumors about so many people being informants and giving up information on either their competitors or, you know, other people in industries and all that. So it's hard to keep track of that. Only the handlers of those particular people really know.
So let's just jump into it. The obvious question is, the third time going to be the charm, Dwayne? Tomorrow, Diddy is expected back in court. The judge is offering up the opportunity for another bail hearing. It was denied twice by two different judges. I assume this is obviously the same judge, whose name I do not have right in front of me, a very long name. But what are the chances tomorrow that Diddy is able to, you know, bond out of the NBC Correctional Center?
I don't think he's got a very good chance of bonding out. I mean, he's got to come up with something new. I mean, when you go back to the same judge again, you got to have something new and substantial. You know, you have to have a change in circumstances in order to get the judge to change his mind, because the judge isn't, you know, especially federal judges, they generally just don't go, you know what? No, I reconsidered it. I think I'll just go ahead and let him out now. They're going to have to come up with something that's new, substantial, that really gets this judge's attention. And I don't think there is anything. I mean, again, if they didn't take their best shot the first couple times they went in front of that judge, then, you know, then they're not doing their job correctly.
Yeah, and Ryan, I mean, $50 million bail was denied. I think he was going to put up like 48 million of it through his mansion, which I understand is in debt anyway. So I'm not sure how that would have worked. But he was going to put up like 48 million through his LA mansion. I mean, in your entire career as an attorney, have you heard of a $50 million bail?
Not to that extent. However, it sounds more than reasonable given what his assets are. And the thing about it, Joel, is the second that he posts bond, if he's able to do so, he has enough resources and connections to where he'll be in the States a matter of hours before he's in Venezuela or somewhere else where he can hide, which the court knows this is a very prolific flight risk individual who's got his access to resources. So to Dwayne's part, unless there's some new smoking gun that's going to come out in court tomorrow, I don't see any way that the judge is going to reverse their decision.
And so there you go. The odds are slim. Someone's asking you what the odds are about this. It is obviously a crazy case. There's so much news on this that is like I literally have to be searching 2 minutes before to get the latest stuff because so much has come out. So I'm just going to try to break down the last couple of days here. One of the things now, Tom, that the government is alleging is, and I'm sorry, that the defense, that Diddy's defense, and they're getting more and more aggressive here, is that this now infamous Cassie Ventura video, which we don't show here because it can be really triggering, but obviously he's assaulting her. They're saying it was edited by the feds. It's actually like a 20-minute video, and they were just showing the worst parts. But I don't understand how you can make that argument. I know you're the non-lawyer here, but how can you make that argument when he's literally kicking this woman? I mean, it's about as ugly as it gets. I imagine, the full 20 minutes is not going to change anybody's mind.
Right. I mean, you know, when it comes to a video, you're going to show the highlights. You're going to show what you want to show, the crime, the crime being committed, not, random people walking in and out of an elevator. No one cares. You want to see the subject of this investigation committing a crime. And that's what it is against this woman, which, kind of set this thing in motion. So editing it, I don't think is the proper way to go, because you're going to just get it to a point where people are going to focus on it and watch, the crime being committed.
Yeah. Just to that point, Dwayne, they're coming out literally saying that, they edited the footage. They had this forensic video analyst, a guy named Connor McCourt, that's going to testify, I guess, tomorrow about this being edited down. But when you look at the shorter clip, there's no doubt what's going on. I've been in news a long time, and you can edit around things, but how do you make that look less worse than it is? Even if you have got the full 20, the full 20 minutes, I think would probably make it worse, not better.
Yeah, I think so too. And again, the government's has really good forensic people also. And again, if you AI alter something, or if you alter a video, there's a difference between it being edited, which means they took a piece of it out and just showed the piece, and there's a difference between that and it being altered. And if it's altered, you can tell. I mean, again, you may not be able to tell with the naked eye, but I've got forensic people that can get that video and tell you in 15 minutes whether or not it's been altered. And again, I mean, he had her on the ground. He was kicking her. He was dragging her by her shirt. I mean, what else do they need to see there? It's going to be really hard for the defense to say, hey, maybe it isn't really what it looked like. And that's what they have to say. That's their job. But that's a tough ask of a judge.
I will need a defense attorney after I say what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it because hopefully Dwayne will help me out here. But it's interesting because I was doing a lot of reading today, and Ellen DeGeneres, and we never get political here, she has vowed never to return to the United States. She moved to the UK now, or is in the process of moving to a farm in a rural section of the UK, again, saying she's never coming back here. But what's interesting, it's kind of being revealed today that she had a very close relationship with a certain hip hop star who's all over the news, Ryan Vesio. I am actually stunned, and we're going to get to something in a few minutes. There was a John Doe filing by an alleged pretty well-known celebrity. But I don't know. Do you feel like we're going to see other big names? And I'm not saying Ellen DeGeneres is responsible for anything as a caveat there, but are we going to see some other really big names dragged into this?
Well, first of all, you walked the line great there of not getting yourself sued. So congratulations, Joel.
Thank you.
This case is going to completely reveal the underbelly of this entire music industry, because you have there's a couple different groups of people that are involved here. You have the artists who come for nothing, become something overnight, and now have more than they can ever imagine. You have people who want to be associated with those people. You have people that are getting taken advantage of. And by the end of this thing, a lot of people are going to get dragged out. And if you're Diddy and you're literally looking at the rest of your life in prison, what loyalties is he going to maintain at the price of no longer having his mansions and his cars and his jets, and instead having 3 squares a meal, 3 squares a day in jail? So I have a feeling that if he's going down, he's going to drag as many people with him as possible.
Yeah, I think the reality of that might be starting to set in and probably get more realistic if he's denied bail tomorrow, which is, I guess, the betting odds are against that, him getting out. There's probably no chance of that. Tom, I'm just wondering if you have been to the MDC, the notorious MDC in Brooklyn. Have you been there, Tom?
Yes, I have.
What's it like in there?
It's not nice. It's not a place you want to be, that's for sure. But you know what? The thing is, when you end up there, it's not central booking in Manhattan. You know where you are, and you know what the totality of what's going on is. That is an intimidating place, not just the surroundings, but just knowing where you are. And that is a mind game. And that's why he's there. That's part of this. The instilling in him that this is no joke. And like I said before in the opening, when the U.S. Attorney's Office, especially the Southern District, has a case on you, you are in a lot of trouble.
Yeah. And why do you say especially the Southern District? I mean, first of all, the feds have unlimited resources, but what is it about the SDNY?
Southern District is probably the most aggressive, strongest U.S. Attorney's Office in the country. That's who I worked with doing international cases and terrorism cases. And they are, they're just strong. They're aggressive, and they construct their cases not to go to trial. They get everything so tight that they just look at you and say, you're done. We're making a deal. This is the offer, because you're not going to go to trial against these people. They have too much on you, and that's what they rely on. That's why they build cases.
Do you think that's going to happen? Do you think that's going to happen here?
Ultimately, yes.
You do. Do you think Diddy ever sees the light of day again, Tom?
No.
Wow.
I mean, he's going to do everything he can. And, like Ryan said, giving up the world. I just think that's in his nature. It's going to be a survival mode at that point, and he's just going to start rattling stuff off. But at that point, who are you going to rattle off that's in more trouble than you? And if there's not any, it's not going to really matter.
Yeah, it's
and there's another dynamic. There's another dynamic here, though, Joel, and I know that Dwayne's dealt with this in his practice. Is once you get a defendant who's old enough, the difference between 20 and 25 years in life is just a number at that point. So given the fact that he's well in his 50s, even if he takes a deal at 25, 30, somewhere around there, his likelihood of getting out is very, very low, especially being classified with this type of conviction that he'd have to plead to. So he almost has nothing to lose.
And your life expectancy in prison is way lower than it is when you're out on the streets. So a 20-year sentence, could very well be a life sentence. Yeah. And along with what everybody's been talking about, I mean, this is like federal cases are generally bigger ones end up with like rats leaving a sinking ship. Everybody wants to point the fingers at somebody so that they can get a better deal. The problem that Diddy has is that he's at the top. And the guy at the top generally doesn't get a better deal if he starts ratting people out, because who are they going to get that? They always want, the feds always want the guy above them, and there's nobody above him. Okay. Now they may want some celebrities. I mean, he may end up with the Epstein suicide, deal if the cameras go out for a couple of minutes, everybody watch out.
Right.
Yeah.
And Joel, that's what I said before in the beginning of it. The deals that were probably made to get Diddy, those might be the people he's going to rattle off, and those deals are already made.
Well, that's interesting. There you go. So that's already a done deal. Ryan, to you, the defense, they're obviously doing everything they can, and they've got a very formidable team. But one of the things they're now crying foul about is, they seized at MDC some of Sean Diddy Combs' personal notes. It was a handwritten to-do list. They're saying this never should have been seized, that it was a violation of his constitutional rights. Number one, is it? I mean, would you be arguing that? And number two, if it is, what happens here? I mean, it's my understanding that if you're in a detention center, which this is, all bets are off. Yeah, your property belongs to them, right?
Yeah, I don't see any constitutional violation here. He's subject to random search. They're allowed to go through anything possible, and if they believe that there's either an item of evidence or contraband, as the facility defines it, they have the right to seize it. Now, if I'm him, then obviously I want to make that argument. And inmates, especially those who have not been convicted, do have certain basic privacy rights, but by large, he gave that up the moment he was taken into custody, involuntarily, but nonetheless, his freedoms are very few and far between. But when you have all this evidence mounting against you, sometimes that's all you can do is try to throw smoke screens and diversions to try to take the focus off the latest lawsuit or the latest victim or the additional evidence that comes out. So that very well could be a public relations strategy by his defense team, because this case is being investigated and now tried in the public.
And also, taking his notes from him, the only argument for a constitutional violation would be, these were notes for my attorney. Yeah. These were attorney-client privilege notes, and that would come down to what he wrote in the notes. If you put, hey, remember to tell the attorney this, things like that, that may qualify, but it's still a long shot, because again, you're in jail and your notes are subject to seizure.
Yeah. This here is an interesting comment from Rich Buddy, who's in the chat quite frequently. I don't know about the last part, but Tom, there's no kind of better observers of people than law enforcement. And here, Rich Buddy says, Diddy did not bribe anybody with the videos. Don't you find that interesting? It's because it's not about power and money like people think. He has all that. It's about lust and sodomy, Satanism. I'm sure it's about Satanism, but the bigger question is, when I first heard these allegations, my 85-year-old mom is my sometime co-host here, and she is a child Holocaust survivor. She's been through it all, and she's a licensed therapist. And she's right away, I said, what's going on here? She said, it's not about the sex, it's about the power, especially with the men. But Tom, what do you agree with her? Or is Diddy just this sexual deviant? And that's really what's on his mind.
Well, I think I agree with her. It's the power. And then everything filters from that. Once you have the power, then you feel the ability to do A and B and C, but it originates from the power that they have or think they have, or others feel that they have, and then they just, I can get away with that. I can get away with that. And then once they start getting away with things, that graduates to the next level and to the next level, where they just feel like they are completely untouchable. Not just Diddy. I mean, that happens in just the criminal world, with drug kingpins and cartels and mob bosses and all that. It's the same lineup, really. It's the same people, just different kind of circuses.
By the way, before I forget, because I will, tomorrow, 12:30 p.m., I believe that's what the time will be. We've got Great Scott. It's your True Crime Phil with America's most respected detective, Phil Waters. Guy investigated over 400 homicides with a clearance rate of 96%. And tomorrow we're going to do something kind of cool. We're going to watch one of his, he doesn't like to call them interrogations, but that's what I'll call it. We're going to watch one of his interrogations, and Scott and Phil will break it down for us. So that's going to be an interesting show tomorrow at 12:30. If you appreciate the content, please hit that like button. Please hit subscribe. We've got a Patreon page as well. The COE, the chief of everything, puts stuff into Patreon. Back to Dwayne for a minute. So the defense kind of went on. This was, again, a to-do list that Sean Diddy Combs allegedly had in his cell. And the defense says that it was jotted by Combs on a white legal pad to memorialize jailhouse conversations with his attorneys. It was, according to them, secretly photographed and then returned to his cell by the Bureau of Prison officials. Does that change anything if this is in fact true, that they were basically sneaking around, taking a photo of it, and then putting it back as though they never took it? Does that change the dynamic? They basically want this prosecution team to be removed from the case because of this.
Well, there's no rule that they can't sneak around in the jail, because they do a lot of sneaking around. Sometimes they'll put an informant in this jail cell with them, with a wire, to get them to say things. And another thing, I don't know why you detectives always seem to get upset when we call them interrogations. You never want them to be called interrogations. That's what they are. They're interrogations. But, again, it comes down to the attorney-client privilege, and there should be some protection, but it's going to depend on what's in there, and whether they took a picture of it or they just took the pad and ripped it out and took the page with them really doesn't matter. What matters is, what was the nature of the communications, and did he have an expectation of privacy in those writings? And you almost have to start with, he didn't have an expectation of privacy because he's in jail. When you're in jail, you got to assume that everything you say, everything you do is being watched by somebody and can be used against you. And I tell my clients that whenever I have a client in jail, that is the first thing I tell them. And I tell them probably 20 times, because I don't know how many times I've been screwed by jail calls when the client calls his mom and basically confesses to the crime.
Screw Diddy for 1 second, because I'm interested in Tom Smith. Tom, I was working at the New York Stock Exchange on 9/11, but I'm curious. So what did you do for the NYPD? You work closely with the feds. You were going to other countries, working in concert with them. What was your kind of day-to-day, week-to-week like there?
Yeah, well, after 9/11, like you said before, I was assigned to the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force. And, we did terrorism investigations around the world. So I was in about 17 or 18 different countries doing terrorism, doing investigations, doing meetings, working with security services from those particular countries, building cases, getting surveillances done, working with different agencies, and then ended up actually at one point being in Afghanistan for 3 months, doing a kidnapping case of a New York Times reporter. So I got to do some very interesting things that I was fortunate enough to get out after 30 years and healthy and still with my brain intact. So it was a win all the way around.
Any close calls while you were overseas?
Oh, yeah. We had one really close call, especially in Afghanistan. One time getting surrounded by about 6 or 7 guys with AK-47, stopping our car and grabbing the steering wheel. And let's just say we were able to get out of that in one piece. So it worked out.
I'll have Tom tell me that full story after the show. I love stories like that. Crazy. Thank you for your service. Again, that's we all, this culture, we worship people like Diddy, unfortunately, instead of teachers, policemen, lawyers, maybe. Ryan Vesio, Donna Morales, this trial is set for May 25th. I never get it right, but I think it's like 90 terabytes of information, which at one point Tommy Scoville told me is like equivalent to the Library of Congress. Is there any way that this trial, with this crazy amount of video, is there any way that it begins in May of 2025?
I don't see it, especially in a federal case where federal prosecutors are so far ahead of a suspect by the time they get the indictment. The feds would be ready to try this case in probably 60 days, but I don't think this thing goes to trial for at least another year and a half, unless Diddy finally gets impatient and just pushes it. Sometimes it's to a defendant's advantage to push a case fast, especially if you have witnesses that may or may not show up, and depending upon the allegations. But that the SDNY U.S. Attorney's Office had this thing all ready to go the moment that they got the indictment and the arrest warrant, so they could go immediately. So I don't hold your breath for me.
Yeah. Tom, you're a guy that investigated cases. What do you walk us through sort of what's happening now? Because this investigation, I guess, is far from over. What is happening behind the scenes, with the NYPD, with the FBI? Are they working in concert? And what kind of things are they looking for? And who are they talking with?
Well, just because he's indicted and he's in jail and you're awaiting a trial, the case doesn't stop. It just continues. So they're still gathering evidence. They're still talking to witnesses. They're still talking to sources that they had, not just here in other jurisdictions. You'll put pieces out there that people are giving up, and, lines of different evidentiary, the evidence that's out there that you have to go get. And, it just doesn't stop. The more evidence you get, the more people you talk to, the more people are going to jump on board, because why? They don't want to get wrapped up in this. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking from the highest level celebrity you can think of. They're getting talked to right now. What do you know? When did you know it? And the line to them is going to be, and you guys know it, you don't want to be wrapped up in this, so tell me what you got.
That's fascinating to me. How do I ask this without getting another possible case against me? But let's put it this way. Diddy was obviously friends with mega stars, bigger than him. We know who I'm talking about. And you're telling me that the feds and or the NYPD or whoever the agency might be is literally knocking on these A+ list celebrities' doors and saying, tell us what you know?
I would. I would in a heartbeat, because listen, nobody at that level wants to be tarnished, wants their career ended. So talking to them, in my mind, as a detective who did this for 30 years, that conversation's easy to me. Hey, you want to be wrapped up in this? You want to be, called into court? And I would say, hey, this does have the possibility of going to trial. And if it does, you're going to get called. You want to be on a witness stand being who you are? Okay, fine. Or let me know what's going on. You could be source number 00217, and that's the end of it. But that's certainly, in my mind, that's what I'd be doing.
Well, and think about it this way too, Joel. You have so many high-profile people. They know what was going on. So you see the arrest happen. You see the indictment get released. And if I'm one of those A-list type people, I'm waiting to see how this is playing out in the media, which is going about as poor for Diddy as possible. So if I'm having to manage my own career and my Beverly Hills mansion or whatever the hell else they have, now, a prosecutor or an investigator is going forth and saying, exactly where this is going. Now's the time to get on the ship or get caught up in the wake. So I completely would expect that those conversations continue to happen. And having dealt with sort of real celebrities or people who think they're celebrities when they get involved in investigations, prosecutors and investigators don't give a damn how many body people they have or how many agents they have or how many, staff they have. They're going to go directly to the person. So as this thing continues to play out, those deals are absolutely being made behind the scenes. And it almost turns into when you have a big conspiracy and every conspirator tries to take each other out to save their own selves.
Wow. So I guess it could definitely go from ugly to uglier. Dwayne, to you. So now, the government and the defense are sparring as you'd expect. So, the defense accused them of unlawfully, seizing these notes. But now the government said, hey, your boy Diddy is witness tampering from inside the MDC. And they gave some kind of specific information saying that Sean Combs from within MDC used 8 inmates' telephone accounts to evade monitoring, and then was paying them through intermediaries. If this is in fact true, I mean, the judge tomorrow is obviously going to take this into consideration. But what are the repercussions of this kind of behavior?
First of all, that kind of thing goes on all the time. I mean, because everybody's borrowing somebody's PIN number so they can make calls and not be recorded as themselves. Of course, they generally always get caught. And then also, it's not unusual for people on the outside to be putting money on people's books in order for exchange for favors that are going on inside the jail, like using other people's phones. So that's something that's pretty common, and that goes on. But you know what? A lot of those calls get intercepted anyway. A lot of those calls are recorded. And if there's anything to do with any kind of witness tampering, they may be played in this next hearing, for the judge. And that would be a nail in the coffin of his release. I mean, that would lock him in jail if he's found doing that. And I had clients that were committing frauds while in jail using other people's. They were making lots of money. So I mean, that stuff goes on. Now eventually most of them get caught, but not all of them. And but again, as close as he's being watched, you got to know that somebody's picking up on this.
Yeah.
Well,
Dwayne, the other inmates would be willing to say, "Oh yeah, hey, make me a deal, and I'll tell you all about what Diddy's doing inside the jail here."
Well, and what great consciousness of guilt evidence. Why do you need to tamper with people if you didn't do anything wrong?
Interesting.
So I would jump through those hoops 1,000 times in a trial about he was talking to this person because he didn't want him to talk. He was talking to that person, so she didn't tell you, the jury, what she told you. So, I mean, there's a difference between having bad facts against you and screwing your case up even more as you continue to give the government even more evidence once you've already been arrested.
This is wild. And, I never really covered true crime, covered politics, covered U.S. equities, but it is like 3D or 4D chess here. It's but it's wild to see how the government and the defense go back and forth. Look at this from Becky Ireland. Joel, this is going to be going on for a long time. Will you ask this awesome panel to periodically come back? Yes, I will. Ryan Vesio knows that.
I do.
Once I get these guys in my grasp, I don't let them go. So they will hopefully, if they're willing to, they will come back. But Ryan, back to you on this. So the quote from this federal filing regarding this witness tampering goes as follows. Since the defendant has been detained at MDC, he has continued to try to evade law enforcement monitoring, corruptly influence witness testimony, and further attack the integrity of these proceedings, and went on to say that his family is involved. The government went on to say the family is involved too with a kind of a social media campaign. They allege that Diddy used a non-authorized messaging app in the prison to communicate with the outside world, and asked his family to create a birthday message, which was intended for the eyes of potential jurors. This is pretty damning stuff. But I guess if you're a good defense attorney, you can say, oh, he was just wishing his family happy birthday or asking, you know what I mean? So how do you get from allegations of witness tampering to this is what he was actually doing?
Well, in this type of digital world, whether you're using other inmates' pins or using contraband phones to get things out, you're leaving the trail yourself. I mean, 25 years ago, it was a lot harder to prove witness tampering because you had to get multiple people to say what the person did. Here the government kind of, there's a fork in the road for them because it is such great evidence of intimidation and consciousness of guilt that there are times where I helped make the decision to allow the person to continue to do these desperate acts because that they're unlikely to be able to actually influence that witness. And most of these witnesses have already given their evidence, whether or not it's been a sworn statement, whether or not it's been testimony to a grand jury. So if the witness changes what they say, and I know that a suspect is trying to intimidate them, then I mean that's like 3 sevens on the slot machine, because at that point now I can prove why these people are changing their testimony. And the worst part is when these people try to undertake these efforts of desperation, even when their attorney's telling them to shut up and stop, they just get more and more brazen. That just creates more and more evidence against them. So at this point, it's sort of like the bullfighter in the ring. Let him run wild with this. And there are some types of cases where a defendant wants to get a message out to a jury. I'm not sure sex trafficking is really one of those cases to where juries are going to buy into conspiracies and look favorable on Diddy in a trial. So good luck trying to influence jurors to think that you're a great guy when there's hundreds of hours of video of God only knows what.
Yeah. That's an interesting point. I mean, Tom, do you think there's going to be like an inherent bias against him because he's this hip hop star, kind of the thug persona from the streets of New York, a bad boy for life? Is the jury going to be, is he going to be starting, behind the 8 ball because of that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, in this day and age, social media, 24-hour-a-day news cycle, that's where all this comes into play. Plus, everyone just knowing who he is anyway. But then you get into, the reputation and the stories that came out even before all this of what was going on. So, yeah, that's all part of it, especially on his level.
Yeah. And Tom, you talked about it. MDC is one of the rougher places you can be housed with, the worst of the worst. And then you got Sam Bankman-Friedman in there, which is an odd person to be in there. I can't imagine that guy holding his own. If he can do it, I can do it, but I never want to ever enter the MDC. Sam Bankman, I will take you in an octagon. It's a challenge. It's on right now. But Tom, what is Diddy's deal in the MDC? And if he goes to federal prison, which I think he will, is he going to be targeted, or is he going to be looked at as like a deity within the prison system?
That's a great question. And it depends on where he is. It depends on his isolation. Is he going to be in a secluded part of whatever prison he may be in if they have those accommodations? So a lot's going to determine, on that, where he ends up. I don't see him walking around the yard. I don't, that's going to be a little tough.
How long does that last for him? Let's say he goes to federal prison. Is he never again going to be able to walk on the yard? Is he going to have to be 80 years old? He's one of the bigger stars in America, right? In the world.
And that's what I mean. It depends where he goes and the security level that prison might be at and who's there. You have to understand, regardless of who he is, regardless of what the crime is, they're protecting him. They have to protect him. His well-being is in their hands, no matter where he is. So they are responsible for his safety and for his well-being, no matter who he is or where he ends up. So that is all going to be taken into account when he gets placed somewhere.
Kathy Smith, I don't know if she's Esquire or not. By the way, Ida Shaw JD is always in the chat, and she always reminds me that these are allegations. These are only allegations. Nothing has been proven in a court of law, but the deck is definitely stacked against Diddy here. Dwayne, to you, Kathy Smith, he's going to do 10 years at the most. What's your response to Kathy Smith here?
Well, this is so high profile that I don't think that they can get away with getting him just 10. And if they offered him 10 years today, he should take it and run. But I don't think they're going to do it because of the nature of the crimes. You know, when he goes to prison, he's going to be in ADSEG, administrative segregation, for lots of reasons. Number one, it's a sex crime. Number two, it's his celebrity profile. And so in some cases, like with Martha Stewart, she ended up on a really cushy yard, making cakes. Okay. But I don't know that he will end up in a yard like that. He's probably going to end up in a maximum security yard, with the worst of the worst. And it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult for him. And the odds of him coming out getting killed during his time there is probably relatively decent.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, Martha Stewart was securities fraud. This is a whole different animal. And I'd be shocked if it was only 10 years. But Ryan, let me ask you a difficult question. If you were retained by Sean Diddy Combs, what would you be doing right now?
Oh, I would be trying to find ways to cram more hours into a day because there's a lot against him. At this point, I think it's about trying to feel out the government to see where their head is at on the case, because more than anything else, the government wants a conviction on this. They do not want to have a defense favorable jury. So I'm feeling the government. My guess is that number is nothing that he can get his head around. So, his best hope is to be able to find something on a couple of complainants and to see when their stories have changed, or as this case continues to go on, people are going to talk to the media and there's going to be book deals and there's going to be things like that, where this to me seems to be the throw everything against the wall defense. And because he is the apex person at the top of this food chain, he doesn't have anybody else to give up. I'm just trying to find some crack for the water here. And if that is a witness who's changed their story, so be it. If it is a sloppy investigation, so be it. But he's in a real hard place on this one.
Yeah, you could say that again. I mean, Dwayne, I got to ask you the same question. This is, I guess, more your world in reality than it is Ryan's. You get a call from Sean Combs that they're firing their legal team. They want to hire you. Where do you start?
Well, the first thing I do is I get an army of private investigators. Okay. And I start going through absolutely every person that is a witness against them. And I start basically finding Oppo research to find out everything you could possibly find out about every one of them. And again, you got to understand, he is innocent until proven guilty. And just because he engaged in some of these acts doesn't make him illegal, unless it's underage people. Okay, if they're adult age people, then now they got to prove that they weren't consenting and that he did things against their will and that he forced people to do things. And there's also a mens rea part of this, meaning what was his state of mind? Was his intention to do these things? And so there's some technical legal arguments to make. They're going to be very difficult because you have things on video. People nowadays, they complain about body cams. Body cams has made my job so much easier because I don't have to go by just what a cop said happened that day. I get to see what happened that day. And again, we have video evidence of a lot of things here, and it's going to be hard to push all that aside.
When you say an army of private investigators, I'm just curious because Tony Busby, I'm going to get to him in a minute. He's filing a lot of these civil suits, but how many PIs would you have to hire? I mean, this is literally a Mount Everest of evidence here. Well,
one decent PI can only do about 60, 70 hours a week worth of work, so you're going to have to have dozens of them. You're going to have to hire different firms in different cities. You're going to have to fan out. The one thing that he has going for him is he has resources. Most defendants don't have resources. Most of the time, I get the government to pay for one investigator and they limit the number of hours they can spend. Okay. In this case, he's got unlimited resources. It's kind of like the O.J. Simpson case. OJ, I call it the OJ defense. They just jammed them into trial when they weren't ready. They didn't have any understanding how DNA worked or anything. This case, it's the feds, and I agree, it's a whole different story. I did a Fed case once, and it was a mortgage fraud case, and I went in there, and I said something, and the guy reached into this 2-foot tall stack of papers and pulled a piece of paper out and said, "What about this?" And I go, "God, how many hours do you have in this case?" He goes, "Oh, about 2,000. I mean, unlimited resources. The feds are prepared. They work their cases up. They do things that are called like show and tells, where, when they first charge your client, sometimes they'll bring him in and they'll do a little presentation for you of all the evidence they have against your client. Okay. And they probably won't do that here because there's too much, but the feds generally have it locked down by the time they file charges.
Interesting. Ryan, and then I'm getting back to Tom, but you have a constitutional right to a speedy trial. Is there any difference when it's on a federal level? You got to think that Diddy hates being in there. He's asking for bail for the 3rd time tomorrow. He's obviously, he wants to get out of there. There is this May, 2025 date, but you already said there's almost no way. So what's the the nexus between a speedy trial and being, correctly prepared for a trial?
Well, especially in the federal system, just as Dwayne pointed out, the feds know this case, and they know this case inside and out, and they're ready to go. Defendants demanding speedy trial, especially in state courts or with smaller agencies or overwhelmed local prosecutors, that can often play to a defendant's benefit. But in a case like this, you have a series of senior federal prosecutors that have been working this case and this case alone. They know everything about this case. They probably know what most witnesses had for dinner last night. They know this case so well. So if I'm Sean Combs and if I'm representing Diddy, I'm telling him, look, let's go ahead and rush this case. Let's rush to trial. Let's not review everything. And then you're likely to get convicted and end up in the same place. So jail's not a great place. Federal prison is just as bad or even worse than the MDC. And he's got one chance. You get tried one time, unless there's a hung jury. But in this scenario, it really is life or death for him. So he's just got to shut up and take it and allow his attorneys the time to prepare, especially when he does have those resources. He could build his own investigative, almost pseudo federal law enforcement department of hired investigators to go out there and put millions and millions of dollars into the case, especially if he's willing to put 50 million up just in collateral for bail. He can spend 8 figures in his defense, especially if he doesn't want to stay in prison forever.
This is an interesting comment from my friend Nikki Cuds from the great state of New Jersey. I'm sure the guards, Tom, are scared for their lives as well. Very interesting. Saying no to Diddy can have real consequences. Do you agree with Cuds that that these corrections officers could be compromised because of the power that he wields?
Yeah, but you hope the integrity just takes over, and you're not intimidated by that. Listen, these guys, especially in the federal system, are surrounded by people even more powerful than Diddy, with more contacts and more violent people in their back pocket, and they still do their job and they're still in there every day. So I don't see them being that intimidated by Sean Combs once he's in there. They're surrounded 24/7 by even more dangerous people than him.
Yeah. You see Mossberg Mom, who I met at the Sarah Boone trial, asked Tupac or Biggie about the consequences. There's a lot of speculation that he was behind that. But the bigger question, Tom, is, you've also got his partner for many years, Kim Porter, died very young. If you are investigating this case, are you going back and looking at some of these other sort of questionable deaths?
Absolutely. You have to. And that's what I said before about, the investigation not stopping. Once you have him and you start hearing other factions of other crimes that happen, yeah, you're going to go back and as far as you can, and the feds will probably have somewhat of a timeline that they're working on. Starting at this time is when we started to hear A, B, and C about it. So you're working around that time. And if it brings you further backwards in that, then so be it. But anything that he touched, was involved in, that had to do with anyone's, a crime against somebody else, you're sure going to do it, because it only adds up. It only just makes it more credible to the case that they're doing now of his history and what he's been doing, his whole career, or pretty much more than half his life.
Yeah. One more question for Tom, because I'm curious about this. I mean, this is such a massive case. Again, I think it's 90 terabytes of information. How is an investigation like this coordinated? Like, I mean, you got people everywhere digging up information. How does it get funneled back properly? And, how do they collate the whole thing?
Well, you have one central office who's going to run the investigation, and they're going to coordinate what they need. And it's a lot of communication. It's a lot of trust. It's a lot of information sharing. You have to, when you're running something like this, and not that it came to fruition, but I ran a large investigation around the world like this. And you have to throw your ego in a drawer and just run it to get the bad guy. And that's a lot of, just like I said, trust and coordination and communication. What do you have? Tasking people to do certain things. And then the FBI is very good at their case management, their filing system, it all going into one central database that is building this up. You have to remember, Joel, once this started, the prosecution, all right, and the trial prep started the day this case started being investigated. They didn't all of a sudden just start throwing, stuff in the files once they had him. The trial prep starts immediately once you start identifying him and crimes. So those files have already been, built up over the years, getting ready for an indictment and a trial.
Especially with the celebrity, they're going to make sure that they got every I dotted, every T crossed before they do anything publicly.
Absolutely right.
Ida Shaw here, thanking the best guest for your time and sharing your knowledge. You got, I would say, best guest, better community. It says it behind me. You got the best community in all of the YouTubes, not just true crime. Dwayne, to you, this is pretty interesting. So Tony Busby is this Marine who's a personal injury attorney out of Houston, Texas. At one point, he did have a tank that he purchased for his front lawn. Guy does not mess around. I can tell you right now, my mom, if I was a personal injury attorney, would say, don't dare get involved with Diddy's stuff. It's not worth the money. You can, be a hit put out on you. But now there's a John Doe filing. This is another attorney who filed this against Tony Busby. His client is reported to be a well-known male celebrity, and he's claiming that Tony Busby, the attorney, is trying to extort people for money. He has accused Houston-based attorney Tony Busby and his firm of, quote unquote, this is the lawyer now saying this, shamelessly attempting to extort exorbitant sums from him, or else publicly file widely false, horrific allegations against him. I mean, this guy is sending a warning shot to Tony Busby. Does Tony Busby care?
Well, I don't know, because again, it depends on how good Tony Busby's information is that he has on these people. And again, this is one of the things when you start suing people and you start naming names and you start outing people. Okay, I mean, what was the guy's name that was on CNN all the time and ended up in jail? Sued Cavanati. Same thing. Cavanati called Nike.
Avenatti. Michael Avenatti.
Avenatti. He goes, yeah, I got all this dirt on your people, on you guys. You better write me a big check, or I'm going to make it public. And it could be. And I don't know if this guy's doing that or not. But there's going to be people out there that are going to try to challenge him. And if this person that's suing, actually, if he went to him and said, listen, you give me X amount of money, or I'm going to make this very public, then that's a problem.
Good old Michael Avenatti. That guy is such a shyster. At one point, he wanted to be like a Democrat candidate for president.
Yeah.
Craziness. People's egos, man. I don't know what is going on in this world. Ryan Vessio. So, by the way, best guest, we usually go about an hour and 15 minutes. So maybe 10, 15 more minutes, and then I promise we will wrap it up. But Tony Busby, look, he says he's got 120 victims. I think there were 5 new lawsuits filed, Ryan Vessio. This John Doe now, who says that Tony Busby's going overboard, the attorney writes that he's trying, Busby is, to capitalize off the quote-unquote explosive allegations against Sean Combs by roping in public figures who've been acquainted with Combs. The attorneys for Doe claim that Busby sent a demand letter earlier this month in which his firm, quote unquote, this is now Busby's firm, threatened to unleash entirely fabricated and salacious allegations of sexual assault that include multiple instances of the R word, rhymes with grape, of a minor, both male and female, if their client refuses to comply with their demands. This is a you-know-what contest right now between two attorneys. I just sort of asked Dwayne this question, but this is like a game of chicken. What does Tony Busby need to do in this situation?
Well,
I mean, he's got to defend himself. There's the old saying, if you have one lawyer in town, he starves to death. If you have 2, they both make a nice living, because there's got to be a fight, in order for the lawyers got to fight over something. But again, it's going to come down to what that demand letter said. That demand letter is going to be the key to everything. And, and you can cross a line, and sometimes you can think that that you're on top of the world, and you can cross a line and not even really realize it. But, I'm guessing that it was pretty strongly worded, and I'm guessing that it's right up to the line, if not over.
Yeah. Ryan Vessio, just to add on to that, this demand letter, the attorneys say, again, for this unidentified or anonymous male celebrity, says that the famous client, having been friends with Mr. Combs, based on the fact that the two often attended similar events frequented by celebrities, but they say that these are baseless accusations, nothing more than a weapon in a calculated plot to destroy the plaintiff's high-profile reputation for profit, despite the complete absence of any factual basis for such claims. So this is also, Ryan, obviously a preemptive move by what appears to be a high-powered celebrity saying, hey, back off. And it's talking about how he wants to also make sure his reputation is not tainted. Gets kind of complicated here, doesn't it, Ryan? I mean, so again, for you, if you're Tony Busby, how are you making sure that, you're not going to end up paying money to another attorney instead of making money?
Well, I mean, it's in for a penny, in for a pound. If you're gonna be out front representing multiple victims and doing that representation in a high profile, high visibility manner, you're assuming the risk of these situations. The one thing that really stands out to me on this, though, Joel, is there is a need sometimes to get out ahead of the coverage. If your client is likely to get roped in and implicated. But the one thing that's not making sense to me about this is if I as an attorney am putting out information already disputing allegations, then why would people rope my client into this unless there was more than a mere, we just happen to be at a Grammys after party together? That's the part that just doesn't make sense here. Right. Where sometimes, and excuse me for growing up here in the South, but it's almost like when you outkick your coverage, and at that point you're putting a light on your guy or your person, male or female, before these items come forward. It's just, you didn't want to say it, but this is a good old fashioned high ego driven attorney pissing contest here that doesn't do anything to help the client at all.
Well, Tony Busby responded, Tom. He did it on Instagram. I didn't know he had an Instagram account, so I am now following him. But he wrote on Instagram, which is kind of funny, that his firm, and I quote, won't allow the powerful and their high-dollar lawyers to intimidate or silence sexual assault survivors. And then Diddy's team said in a statement to ABC News, the extortion lawsuit against Mr. Busby exposes his barrage of lawsuits against Mr. Combs for what they are: shameless publicity stunts designed to extract payments from celebrities who fear having lies spread about them, just as lies have been spread about Mr. Combs. So, Tom, they obviously took that opportunity to use it as a poker chip in favor of their own client. You're the non-attorney here, and you're a New Yorker, so I know you're going to give me an honest answer. I mean, what are your thoughts on this guy, Tony Busby? He's kind of controversial. I mean, a lot of these clients he's taking on, I mean, all of them, as far as I know, up to now, have basically not been identified. And he's trying to cut deals so they don't have to go to court. If these people are truly victims, I'm not sure how I feel about the fact that all these quote unquote high powered celebrities are just going to pay for it to go away. I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, going back to the original thing, this is why detectives are happy when we're not lawyers, because when this starts, we just sit back and laugh because we're not in the middle of it. So this is the entertaining part. When you're involved in this as a detective, you just, okay, I have nothing to do with this. I have no say in it. You guys do what you're doing. So this whole thing, but you know what? It's hard. It's hard to tell when you have lawyers who are celebrity lawyers. You know, what's their motivation? You know, do they want more of a spotlight? Are they really trying to help their clients? Are they trying to take the focus of their clients away from them and put them on themselves and doing the right thing? You know, it could be a whole number of things of his motivations of what he's doing and why he's doing it.
Mossberg Mom, it's a money grab, plain and simple, followed by Nikki Cud, such a sleazeball. But look, everyone needs an attorney when you need an attorney, if you get what I'm saying. Dwayne, to you, it's hard to believe, but at least 5 new lawsuits have been brought in just the last few days. One lawsuit was actually tossed out by a judge, obviously a civil suit. It was brought by a 39-year-old, again, anonymous male who claimed that he was being SA'd at a house party in New York. 39 years old at the time. He's now living in Georgia. The quote, according to the plaintiff's testimony, was, after consuming the drink, plaintiff began to feel disoriented and began to lose control of his body and to lose consciousness. He was in a dark bedroom with black walls, on a bed with black sheets. Everything around him was dark. Plaintiff was horrified to find Combs on top of him, doing what he shouldn't be doing. Let's put it that way. I'm curious, Dwayne, this particular case was dismissed. The others haven't been. Do you have a sense as to why? I guess that would be question 1.
Well, you know, without knowing the exact facts of the case, it's really hard to guess. I'm assuming that the judge, probably a motion for summary judgment or a motion to dismiss at the beginning of the case, for lack of evidence of the claim. Now, it's anybody can make a claim, but once the suit gets started, you have to produce something to keep it going. In criminal, it's probable cause. In a civil case, you got to get past the motion for summary judgment, which is if everything you told me is true, okay, given the state of the law, you don't win. And that's a motion to dismiss is the same thing. So my guess is that it was a pretty weak allegation.
What I just referred to my notes here, so there's a little more information. And Ryan, this is when the law gets technical. The court said to this guy whose case was dismissed, who claims that he was SA'd by Diddy when he was 39 years old. The court said that this person failed to notify the court that he was filing as a John Doe. That's interesting to me. So his entire case is just gone now? Like, what is his recourse?
Well, in most instances in civil matters, if a motion to dismiss is granted, the plaintiff is given at least one other opportunity to amend their filing. So the law is set up to protect plaintiffs for being able to bring their cases forward and not losing on cases due to technicality. So in a situation like this, and I haven't seen the filing, but based upon what you've represented, there's a certain process that has to be followed for an individual to file as a John Doe or a Jane Doe or an unknown party. The federal rules of procedure have specific requirements for that. So just because it was dismissed for that reason, I would expect that the plaintiff would have the ability to file it either following the proper procedures to file as a John Doe or otherwise put his name on the lawsuit. So I don't think it's gone forever. Now, if he messes up the second filing, after your second or third attempt, that's when the courts can step in and say, we've given you a couple bites at the apple and we're going to preclude you at this point.
By the way, I don't know if you guys caught that, but my ears, Ryan Vesio said the way I said you represented things, I immediately got nervous that a lawyer was questioning how I was representing things. So made me a little nervous. Everyone at STS knows that prison is my biggest fear. Maybe being up in space would be. I bet you, Tom, would you be scared to go up to space? I bet you not.
No,
you'd want to.
I'd give it. I'd do it if I had the opportunity. Sure.
I grew up on the Space Coast, Joel.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, back then you couldn't be an astronaut if you were taller than 6 foot. And when I hit that in 8th grade, it was a sad, sad day in the Vescio house.
Oh, man. How tall are you, Ryan? Don't tell me you're 6'9".
Only 6'6". So
6'6". Whoa, that's
tall enough to be really crappy at hide and go seek.
Did you play basketball? I hope.
I did.
Oh, good. You got something out of it there. Cynthia, I have no idea what the question is. Cynthia, I'm working off of Fisher Price equipment. I'm looking down because I don't have my normal notes here. But if you put your question back in there, and the COE is tending to other business tonight. So, and for those who do not know, the COE is the wife. She is the chief of everything. So, Tom, back to you. So, again, the flurry of accusers. One is an actor who says in the late 90s and early 2000s, Combs assaulted him, basically pointed him out in a group setting at a party and said, he'll do, and took this guy. Another accuser says she was 17 in 2004, assaulted at a 4th of July party in the Hamptons. I mean, people are piling on this guy like I've never seen. Rightly so. If this all happened, I mean, is there any way that all these allegations, Tom, are false and there's just a gazillion people filing suits because Diddy is worth all this money, or is it a case of where there is smoke, there's fire?
Probably a little of both. I think that's fair to say. Probably 50-50, maybe 60-40. But when you have allegations, again, like, I said it before, the case doesn't stop because he's indicted. So the allegations have to be corroborated. They have to be matched up with the timeline that the FBI has or the U.S. Attorney's Office has to see if that fits. Who else was there? I mean, that's part of the interview of this individual. Who else was there with you? Who do you remember being there? What date was it? You try to get as much information to corroborate it. And if it does all line up and it works out and it is corroborated, now you have another charge, you have another plaintiff or person going against Diddy, and that's fine. But those all have to be, ironed out and filtered out the best way the FBI, the NYPD, who was ever investigating it, can do, because you can't just have a multitude of just people that are just part of this now without going through each one and making sure it's legitimate.
Well, and sometimes victims are scared to be the first one out of the gate.
Right.
And they're, I've represented victims to where their stories were legitimate and they were scared. Mm-hmm. And once they see almost a community, I mean, we saw this with Nasser up in Michigan in his case, where as victims want to feel like they're being heard, and oftentimes when you have a group of victims that have been violated by a single person, they become a community that strives and draws strength on each other.
Great point. You're right.
Yeah. Couple of things to just kind of wrap up, and we'll get final thoughts. So now, the New York Post is obviously doing a ton of reporting on this, and sometimes it's great. It's a fun paper to read, but sometimes it's a little, I think Tom will tell you, a little suspect because they have all these anonymous sources. But this actually was from a different media source, and this was a Saturday Night Live alum, Anna Gasteyer, who was on the show between 96 and 2002. And she was talking on a podcast, I think it was yesterday, where when Diddy was featured on SNL as the guest, he demanded a closed set, meaning he wanted all the doors locked. There's that story. And then the New York Post had a story today saying that Diddy paid $25,000 for a party. This was in Vegas. It was a mansion that he rented out, $25,000. But he demanded that locks be put on all the bedroom doors. There's footage of this from the guy who once was a property manager, a guy named Jason Haight, Hight, who went on, by the way, to Dwayne to say that on some of this video, there's footage of sushi being eaten off of the bodies of women. I mean, this is like Caligula style stuff here, Dwayne. It's pretty crazy. Dwayne, by the way, is a formidable attorney who comes to us from the Phoenix area. Same question I asked Tom, and your final thoughts. I mean, when there is this much smoke, is there a forest fire behind it?
Well, that's usually what the government argues, is that, hey, all this had to have happened. I mean, if it was just one accuser, then there's a possibility that it didn't happen. When there's 30 accusers, there's got to be something going on there. And it's really hard to fight as a defense attorney. Number one, I would fight really hard to sever defendants or sever victims and have 30 different cases and try each case separately. Now, the judge probably isn't going to allow that, but that would be a hill that I would try to die on, because I want to separate them so I can try each one separately.
Ryan Vecchio, he is a former homicide prosecutor out of the great state of Florida, the Orlando area. And now you're a victim's attorney. Is that right? I always screw that up, Ryan. But
you do, and we give you a pass about it. So.
I got it right. Now that I know you're 6'6", I got to be more careful. Yeah, this same party at this mansion was for a rapper named Meek Mill. It happened back in 2014. According to this property manager, this guy, the party took place on May 3rd, 2014. This guy said that there was, shockingly, rampant cocaine use with broken bottles and condom wrappers left all over the property. One thing I do not think I would want to be right now, although they're making a ton of money, Ryan, is P. Diddy's, or as Nancy Grace calls him, Cuff Daddy's attorney. It is a next to impossible job. What are your final thoughts about all this? Where do we head next here?
Well, everybody has a right to be represented, and everybody is presumed innocent until it's proven at trial. So, it's easy to take shots at attorneys who represent bad clients, but everybody deserves the right to zealous representation. But sometimes defendants and clients leave you with nothing to work with, and that seems to be the case now. I think where this entire case goes down to, and not to date myself and my affinity for 90s hip hop growing up, Joel, but Diddy co-wrote a song called Money, Power, Respect, and that's the persona that he tried to perpetuate here. The problem is he did it in ways that were highly illegal and thought that he was so powerful and strong that nobody would ever turn on him. And victims have a right to be heard. And in this case, good luck to Mr. Combs in his pursuit to avoid the eagle talons of justice here.
I love that closing, the evil talons of justice. Obviously high IQ, Ryan. I would never come up with a phrase like that. So this party, Tom, was for this rapper Meek Mill. Coincidentally, today or yesterday, Meek Mill on Instagram sent an encouraging message to Sean Diddy Combs. And the quote is, "They putting black men in jail off stories. I wish Puff well. He's a black man. I hope he didn't do most of that that they're saying he did. Why are you also scared to talk? You almost got S that rhymes with hit in the closet. My past, the streets, it's nothing to hide." So Meek Mill here coming out, obviously, playing the race card. I don't think there's anything, racist here. I think it's just a matter of some really bad choices by Sean Diddy Combs, and now he's paying the consequences for it. What are you looking for next in this very sordid case?
I think it's just going to play out the way we all think it's going to. A lot of being involved in these, I can say this, a lot of work goes into it. And the coordination and evidence gathering and probably, months and years of gathering this all up, presenting it to the U.S. attorney and them saying, yeah, we got him, and doing all of this. I think they got him. And it's just a matter of the timeline and the calendars going by, and until it is ultimately finished and he's in federal prison, because I think that's where it's going to end up. The Southern District, their batting average is really, really good, especially something at this level. So I'm betting on them to kind of wrap this up when it needs to be, and it'll be over.
Spoken like a true New Yorker. I personally believe Diddy's days are numbered as a free man, and he's probably going to be spending the better part of the rest of his life behind bars. And because he's so high profile, I think he's going to have a tough time. But amazing panel tonight. Thank you to Ryan. Thank you to Tom. Thank you to Dwayne. Amazing. Will you guys all come back?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
All right. And Tom, the name of your Gold Shields, is that the name of the podcast?
That is the name of the podcast. Yes, it is.
And we find it on YouTube?
It's on YouTube. It's on Rumble and every audio channel that's out there.
Wow. And how long have you been doing it for?
We started our third season in January.
Oh, awesome. And each episode is what? How do you break it down?
What, time-wise? Lengthwise?
Are you talking like what are you discussing?
What we do is we profile high-profile cases, either military operations or true crime investigations. But what we do is we have the detectives or military members or authors of these, big books of high-profile cases. They come on and they're our guests, so they tell their own story about what happened in the investigation or the military mission, about what we're talking about. We've had guys from SEAL Team 6 on, NYPD detectives, LAPD detectives, all sorts of people. So it's a large group of guests that we have hitting a lot of different topics.
Yeah, it's that sounds super interesting. NYPD, in my opinion, the best law enforcement agency in the world. Dwayne, your channel again is just Dwayne Cates. Is that it?
Yeah, all one word. My name, Dwayne Cates, DWANE, and
nice.
It's got all my clips from all my TV appearances.
We'll have people check it out. And Ryan, what do I plug for you, Ryan? A man who gives his time. Nothing.
I'm just honored to be here, Joel. So
don't worry, I'm coming back up to Orlando for Stefan Stern, so I'll be taking you out to dinner. But thank you all for being here. We are going to be back 12:30 tomorrow. Ned Smith, I know you're going to be concerned about this tomorrow morning. If it's not the human kids, I am taking Fred and Ethel, my pug and boxer. They've got their annual vet visits tomorrow. I cannot get Fred to shut up. He went to the dog park. He will not stop yapping. And I will be an embarrassed parent tomorrow at the vet's office when he's yapping like a little you-know-what. So I got to get him to stop doing that. And then 12:30, we're here with Phil and Scott. It's going to be really interesting. So, and then next week, by the way, I don't know how to let me know this. I guess you can email me at survivingthesurvivor@gmail.com. I've been a Coast to Coast fan for 100 years. It's a late night radio show. And George Norrie, who is the host, on holidays, he actually goes on air because he feels like his radio show is a large family and a lot of people are lonely on the holidays. So if you would like a show on Thanksgiving, email us survivingthesurvivor@gmail.com. Maybe I can even drag Carm into this, and we will do a show on Thursday for you. It might not be true crime. It might just pick Carm's brain. I don't know. Anyway, I'm rambling on. Love you, America. Love you, Orlando. Love you, Phoenix. Love you, New York City. Guests, stick around 1 second. We will see you on the flip side tomorrow.